We're talking about community, and I want to start off with what I fully acknowledge is going to be a little bit of a contentious, provocative question. I'm actually not trying to be facetious or controversial. I want us to think about this, and hopefully I'm going to kind of scratch the surface of answering the question biblically. And the question is this: is God really all you need? Is God really all you need? You might be able to think of songs. I don't know what the name of the song is, but there's this one song that has this refrain of all I need is you, Lord. All I need is you. And it's a beautiful song. It's a great song. And there's nothing wrong with the song. I just don't know that that is the complete truth. And before you walk out of here and think I'm a heretic, just stick around for a few minutes. Let me start pretty much near the beginning. In the creation story of Genesis, God creates all, just pretty much everything that we've come to see and enjoy. And then he creates man, and up until this point he said, this is, he creates the heavens and earth, this is good. At the end of the next period of creating the stars and the sun and everything, he's like, this is good. And then the birds of the air and the animals of the that walk around the land, this is good, and vegetation, and he keeps commenting on how this is good, this is good, this is good, and then for the first time when he says this is very good is when he creates the first human being, the first man, who we call Adam. But then, interestingly, so it's good that he's created. But then, interestingly, in chapter 2, verse 18, it records God saying, it is not good for the man to be alone. Now, bear in mind that he had God. So please, just right off the bat, understand I'm not diminishing for a second how much we need God. We need God more than anybody else. I need God more than anybody else. There are things that God can and does do for me and for us that no one else can do. But I just want to bring your attention to the fact that Adam had God, and God said it's not good for him to be alone. We actually read throughout Scripture over and over and over again the value of being in community, the value of being in life-giving relationships. I do want to add that important bit, life-giving relationships. There are lots of relationships that are not life-giving, they're destructive, and that's not what I have in mind when I actually want to reclaim the word community in the biblical sense. I want to redeem the word community, that is not just something social, but that is something far more valuable, intentional, something far more rigorous. It is not good for man to be alone. I remember when I responded to God, my first year university, 18 years of age. It was a life-changing encounter. It's to this day, and it's nearly 30 years, to this day, it is impossible for me to fully articulate or to put into words, just kind of like the clouds being parted, the curtains being opened, the lights coming on, I experienced God in a life-changing way. I experienced His grace and peace. I experienced His forgiveness. I experienced a sense of His love, things that were so far beyond intellectual, and I'd grown up in the church. So I had a life-changing experience with God. But I honestly cannot tell you that I would still be in a relationship with God if it wasn't for wonderful people that I got to do life with and be a part of community with. And I see it as a complete gift from God. It was the gracious gift of God. Some of you have heard me say that when I went to go study in Australia, I went to go study briefly at a ministry school for a year. I felt like I left God behind in South Africa. It was so weird. It was so hard. And I think part of it was God kind of just removing all of the extra things that supported me sort of emotionally and that made life a bit easier and all the rest. The church was different. The people were weird, and not just because they're Aussies. It was just I thought they thought I was weird. I thought they were weird. It was just so hard. And looking back, I think that a massive part of that was because my community changed. Now, having said that, it was absolutely God's will. I I still grew in community there, being uncomfortable at having people around me that are different to me. It was kind of, iron sharpening iron, and there was friction, and it was the most significant 1 year period of my life in terms of just having to really let my roots go down deeper into God, having to get over myself in terms of some of my ideals and preferences, and having to actually grow in relationship with other people. I cannot overstate the role that people have played. Friendships, relationships, leaders, people that have invited me to take a next step. The first time someone would have invited me to a prayer meeting like we have on Tuesday night. The first time someone would have invited me to a life group. The first time someone would have encouraged me to get involved in serving somewhere. The first time someone would have guilt-tripped me into fasting. Invited me into fasting. The first time I would have been encouraged or invited to go on a missions trip, or just the countless formational conversations that I would have had with people that were patient enough to let this OCD, over-analytical individual kind of like wrestle over thoughts and questions and doubts and ideas that I just didn't have easy answers for. I am deeply grateful for the role of people in my life. And when I say I don't know that I'd be here, I'm not talking about in this role. Like, that for me is a given. I wouldn't be. I don't think I'd be in a relationship with God. That's how significant I think the role of relationships have been. I can't say that for sure because God is incredibly gracious and incredibly kind. But I still think through His kindness and grace, He would have kept bringing people around. They would have kept giving me, opportunity after opportunity that I would have had to just keep rejecting if I wanted to, kind of stay separate from Him. I am so grateful for the role of people. Now, one of the goals, I believe, of community, one of the goals of relationships, life-giving relationships, is to actually be increasingly known and to be loved anyway. Like, that's the ultimate. That's not where you start, so just relax. For those of you that maybe you were tricked into coming to church this morning, or maybe you're exploring Christianity, or maybe you've been hurt by a bunch of Christians, and so you're like, that sounds nice, Jason, in theory, but you don't know what I've been through. I don't, and I know that a lot of Christians, or people proclaiming to be Christians, have hurt lots of people. I know people have been disappointed and hurt by me. It's messy. But I want to suggest that this isn't where you start, but I do believe that this is part of where God wants us to end, is where we have one or two or three people that know us, warts and all, vulnerabilities, weaknesses, strengths, hopes, dreams, failures. They know us and they love us anyway. Because that's how God is towards us. God's not shocked by any part of our lives. He knows us better than we know ourselves, and He loves us anyway. He cannot love us more. And I do believe to my core that it is part of God's plan to use the family of God, which is biblical language, to actually help bridge gaps, to actually help people experience that being known and being loved anyway. In spite of not having our act together, in spite of not having it all right. And I think that's where so many of us as Christians have gotten it wrong so often, is that there's this confusion over what it means to have a moral standard and what it means to love someone. And how you can love someone without necessarily agreeing on everything or without endorsing everything. Hatred and judgment has never, ever led someone to a life-giving change. You read the encounters that Jesus had with people. He was compassionate. He was gracious. He gave dignity. The only time that Jesus was a little bit hectic with people was actually with the self-righteous. That was it. The only time he was challenging to people were towards people who thought that they were better than what they were. They were confident in their own righteousness. And I'm saying that actually the Church of Jesus Christ should be, arguably, the safest place in the world for someone to be increasingly known and loved anyway, encouraged anyway, supported anyway. So, many of you know the story. God creates Eve. Adam was pretty happy. He's like, whoa, man. And so they are married. I know that's cheesy. Then, and by the way, I want to be clear that what I'm referring to here is not marriage. It is the gift of companionship, the gift of people that you're journeying together with, the gift of community. I don't think you have to be married to experience the deepest forms of relationship. I think you can, and I think it's probably God's will that the deepest community you experience is with your spouse if you're married. But please don't believe the lie that you have to be married to be known and loved. In fact, some of the people experiencing the most pain are married, and they feel the opposite. They feel increasingly known and increasingly unloved. And so they actually need a place where, appropriately speaking, where they can be loved. And so I love, now this is not exactly what I think this text was meaning. I think the text is speaking more literally, but I think it's a beautiful metaphor for what I'm trying to get at. Recorded in Genesis 2 verse 25, it says, "Now the man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame." They were both naked, but they felt no shame. I think they're speaking literally, but I also think that this is a picture, that this could be a beautiful metaphorical picture into what God actually wants for us. I am convinced that God's will for me to love Sue better is to love her more, to grow in it being unconditional, to grow in being the safest place possible. For Sue to feel seen, known, for better and for worse, and to feel loved, completely and totally loved. We need life-giving relationships. The key verse that we're going to be referring to from time to time over this year is found in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 16. It says, this is speaking of God, probably Jesus in particular. He makes the whole body fit together perfectly. So this is referring to believers, to followers of Jesus, right? Referring to them as the body of Christ. He puts them together perfectly. And then look at this. As each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow. As each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow. So that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. Or to put it more simply, each part doing its part helps the other parts grow. Each part doing its part helps the other parts grow. So then it makes you wonder, well, when I'm not doing my part, is it possible that other parts are not growing? I would say a resounding yes. If I was our spiritual enemy, I would do everything possible to try and distract and discourage us from community. Distract and discourage us from being real. Distract and discourage us from getting involved. Distract and discourage us from actually partnering together for better and for worse through all the messiness and some of the neat, brief moments. I would want to do everything I can to keep us from having every part playing its part, helping the other parts to grow. And I would argue that if we love others, in other words, so much more than just a nice statement or a nice song saying we love, no. If we actually love one another, we will want to play our part, helping one another to grow. Now, in case you missed the few times I've already said this, community is messy. Can I have an amen? Okay, you've all been in church for a while. Everyone that just said amen. Community is messy. It's mosserig. It is hectic. Community is messy. Why else would Paul write earlier in that chapter, Ephesians 4 verse 2, always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other. Why? Because we're going to have to make allowances for each other's what? Why? Because of your love. Make every effort. It's going to take effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit. This isn't a false, fake, superficial, sentimental kumbaya moment. No. This is a gritty, rigorous. We need to put effort into staying united in the Spirit. Not united around a personality, not even united around a cause, united in the Spirit. We are united around our love for God and His love for people. Binding yourselves together with peace. So what this means is that we might need to be mindful of our human tendency towards wanting perfection, towards wanting the ideal. I don't think there's anything wrong with being idealistic. I do think it's going to be destructive, though, to be naive. For me to expect other people to be perfect, for me to expect other people to never disappoint or never let me down or never break a promise. Now, this is different, and we'll unpack this over the time that we have together over the next few weeks and throughout the year, but obviously there's a difference between someone that keeps causing harm and is destructive and is doing damage. That's a different story, but guys, there's so much everyday, ordinary stuff where we need to push through our idealism and our naivety. Dietrich Bonhoeffer called it the wish dream. And he actually made reference to this idea of how sometimes living with this wish dream is actually the obstacle to Christians experiencing real community. And basically the point he's trying to make is actually the obstacle to real community can be our idealism and our naivety, expecting everyone to be perfect and then getting highly offended and giving up when people let us down. So community is messy, but thank you, Mark. It is worth it. It is worth it. It is beautiful as well. I think that we experience our highest highs and our lowest lows relationally. There is incredible joy to be experienced with people. There's incredible pain to be experienced with people. It's worth it. It is worth it. It is not God's plan for us to live lonely, isolated lives. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Now, some of you are like, I'm pretty good with going fast, thanks. And I'm sure I've got a bit more stamina than others, so I'll go fast and far. Yeah, listen, you might be the outlier. You might be an overachiever. But somewhere along the line, you are going to need someone else. You might want to do your solo marathon, but you are running on a road that others have made. You are relying on refreshments being refreshed that others are providing. You are probably going to be staying somewhere that people are facilitating. We need one another. Today, we have already benefited from, I think, just from a wonderful, life-giving time of being able to just look at God during worship. Some of you would have been encouraged, I believe, through the short encouragement that Taddy shared. Some people are watching online right now because of the work that others are facilitating. We need one another. Whether you feel it or not, whether it's blowing your hair back or not, whether it's giving you goosebumps or not, we need one another. However, not all relationships are equal. All relationships are not equal. Some relationships are the complete opposite. They actually take you away from God's destiny. They can take you away from God's plan for your life. However, the Bible obviously paints a picture for us through many different passages recorded in different parts of the Bible of what it might look like. So again, let's not be naive, but we can be idealistic. And so there are a whole bunch of what we call one another statements or verses. Things like love one another, encourage one another, pray for one another, celebrate, rejoice with one another, grieve with one another. Use our gifts and experience to build one another up, confess to one another, and receive confession from others. And in that process, minister mercy, minister grace, forgive one another, persevere and journey with one another. That means that there are times where we're just going to be holding space with people, and we're not going to feel the pressure to give quick, easy, cheap answers. We're not going to do what Job's friends did, which was patronize him for tens of chapters, trying to give him their best answers, when actually when in the end God says, you guys actually should have just shut up. You should have just been present with the man. The man was suffering enough as it was. No, like, guys, that's wisdom right there. Some of us feel this pressure to have answers for people because we're hurting when we see someone we care about hurting, and so we want to be able to make them feel better quickly. But actually, that's where there are limits to what we can do. But there's also stuff we can do. We can be present. We can sit in that mess with the person. We can sit in that question, sit in that pain, sit in that mystery. And I believe that this speaks to an enormous amount of humility and hunger. Humility in the sense that, listen, for us to accept that we need other people, that takes humility. For us to be willing to be a friend or someone that's willing to be present with someone else, that takes humility. But I also think for us to have life-giving relationships, I cannot encourage you enough to also look out for people that are hungry for God. People that want to grow in their relationship with God. That is what was so shocking to me at 18. Meeting other young people. I didn't know that there were other young people that were interested in God. The church I grew up in, there was one other guy roughly my age who hardly ever came, and he was weird. Like, he was definitely not interested in God. So for me, it was incredibly life-giving to find other 18, 19, 20-year-olds that actually had a passion for God. And it wasn't a personality thing. It was a shared hunger. We need to get around other people that are also hungry for God. So I can't encourage you enough to take your next step. And we're in different places in our journey with God and with community, but all I'm encouraging us to do in this first message, I'm just laying a little bit of a foundation, just a little bit of an introduction, is I'm encouraging you to take your next step, whatever that might be. I want to encourage you that you cannot force friendship. In fact, sometimes I even get nervous with the word friendship because I think that can sort of limit us to sometimes what we have in mind. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just cautioning you in terms of the people that have had a huge impact on my life are not all people that I would have gone away on holiday with, or bride with, or wanted to go camping with, or there are people that I've had incredibly impactful relationships with, often of different ages, but it's been because of being on purpose together, serving together, connecting with one another for other reasons. Then there are other people that I could do life with. We would exercise together or play sports together, or our families were in similar stages of life, and so we would go camping together, and so it's not less than that, but don't think that a relationship cannot be significant just because you don't want to spend Friday night together. Take your next step. You cannot force relationships or friendships, but you can sow into them. You can't make someone else play their part, but you can decide to play your part. And if enough people decide to play their part, guess what? Slowly but surely, other parts are going to start to grow. Now, some of you that have been around for a while have heard me refer to some of these kinds of stages or phases or layers of relationship, and I want to just touch on it quickly to just remind you of maybe some of the options in terms of where you might need to take a next step. We don't rush through all of these stages, but we start somewhere. I want to unpack them with a few words, one being fun, the other facts, the next feelings, and the last one is future. Fun makes reference to being side to side with someone. There's commonality. There's a common interest. In fact, I love how C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Four Loves, spoke about the U2 moment. Not U2 like the band, who are amazing, but the U2 moment. He talks about how friendships, he was using the word friendships, how friendships begin when you have that U2 moment. It's like, oh, you also have kids of the same age? You also enjoy cycling. You're also interested in God. You're also fill in the blank. There's a level of commonality. You might not have everything in common. I'm going to encourage you just to settle for one thing in common. Seriously. You just start off with commonality. It could be your stage of life. It could be that you're in school together. It could be that, so for some of our young people, they're going to be on stand camp together. That was the camp that facilitated me having this life-changing experience with God. That's where I met friends. And the big thing wasn't that our personalities were the same or that all of our hobbies were the same. No, the common interest there for us was that we actually were interested in God. We actually wanted to grow in God. But it could be that you have an interest on serving on a team together. That's an easy, low-hanging fruit, low-threat, easy place to start out, just where somebody else can actually know your name. I can't tell you how much it has disturbed me over the years as a pastor to know that people have disappeared or kind of fallen off the radar, only to like realize this a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, and I'm thinking, look, I certainly didn't know you, and then realizing that actually no one knew that. Like, there was nobody that even knew that this person was no longer around. Now, there are other situations where people have been connected and they've been, and no one's cared. That's a different story. I'm just saying, this isn't church, actually. Not according to the biblical definition. Yes, this is something. Yes, this is a gathering. Yes, it's part of it, but it's so much more than this. The church, the word ecclesia makes reference to the called out ones. No, we are separated for a purpose. And in that, we are a body. We are a family. We are an army. The Bible uses all these metaphors that make reference to us having to connect to the people around us. Maybe your common interests might be hiking, fishing, running, crafting, reading. I think people still play Pokemon. Maybe you love doing handyman stuff. And so you might want to, maybe you get a couple of guys together and it's like, hey, let's avail ourselves to helping out a single mother that needs some repairs being done to us. Just common ground. And so just for what it's worth, that'd be a big win for me today. If nothing else, just to encourage you to just get into that space of, I'm cautious with the word fun, but it had an F and I wanted another F. But also because I think that there should be some enjoyment. Like we're not going to last long in relationships if there's no enjoyment. So like that's okay. Don't worry. You're not superficial if you actually would like to enjoy. In fact, I'd say you're a little bit naive if you think you're going to endure not enjoying people for a long time. Which is why we even say to people that join life groups, like it's okay to like date a little bit. I mean, you literally are going on a blind date if you don't know the people that you're going to be meeting for the first. I'm like, I don't know how much courage it must take for someone to actually check out a life group for the first time. Like you're coming into a group of strangers. That's hectic. So we say it's okay. Just check them out. If you don't feel like there's a chemistry, it's okay. Check out another one. Anyway, so that's fun. Where there's something in interest, something in common. You're kind of side by side looking at something that you're interested in. A next level would be what I call facts, which is more face to face. And so this is where you actually talk to each other. You get to know just a little bit, just like some of the superficial stuff, like where you live, if you're at school, or what you do for a living, or you're studying, or you're married, whatever. Just superficial information. Another level, and it is different, is what we call feelings. That's where it's not side by side, face to face. This is a little bit more heart to heart. This is where you actually, over time, are building up enough trust to share a little bit. And I would say, be careful. Just share a little bit. Just so you know, if you're going to a coffee or a life group or a team, and the first thing you do right off the bat is just vomit all your deepest, darkest stuff, you're probably going to be thought of as being a little bit weird. Like, you don't have to start there. Like, it's okay. Just start with, hey, I'm Jason. And whatever other information you want to share. But I do think it is so important to get to a place with some people. And by the way, this funnel gets narrower and narrower, fewer and fewer people. But where you feel safe enough to share a little bit more about how you feel. I'm frustrated about this. I'm sad about that. I'm feeling angry at God right now because of fill in the blank. I'm discouraged. Or, hey man, I'm so grateful right now because of fill in the blank. We share a little bit more. And then I would say the final level, by the way, this isn't like scientific. These are just me trying to put these things into categories, would be, I used to use the word formation, but I'm trying to make it clearer, and I'm using the word future because I think a great definition of this group is where we're actually fighting for each other's future. And that includes formation. So that's where we're back to back, and where we care about that person. I'm so grateful that I've had people in my life over the years that cared about my future more than my feelings in that moment. Some of us have stopped people from loving us well because we wanted them to care about our feelings more in that moment than about our future. And someone being a friend to your future has got to be arguably one of the greatest gifts that you could have from another person. So, again, all I can encourage you to do is position yourself. Just take your next step. Take your first step. Find something in common. We cannot guarantee life-giving relationships. We can only try and facilitate them. We can facilitate them through teams that you can join. We can facilitate them through life groups that you can join. I can't guarantee that you will find the people that you're looking for on your first go, or that it won't be messy. In fact, I'm probably going to guarantee that it's going to be a little bit messy, but hopefully still beautiful and life-giving. Okay, this would be a great starting point for some people, and you're going to struggle to find an excuse. Is if you're like, I'm not joining any team, I'm not joining any life group, whatever. If you come to church regularly, there's a good chance that right now you are sitting where you normally sit. I mean, I'm looking at you, and I know that you're sitting where most of you sit most of the time. I know who's going to yawn where at what time. I know who's like the air, or who's How much longer does he have? Okay, 4 minutes. It's very encouraging. No, I'm joking. So how about? And I'm not even joking. For some of us, this will take some faith. It'll take some courage. How about you literally just introduce yourself to the person that you sit in front of or behind or next to almost every week? But now it's gotten so awkward because it's been 6 months and it's like, you know what, did we actually meet once? Did they tell me their name? I can't even remember their name. It's okay. Can we just give each other grace? Is that okay? Maybe just start. By the way, that's why I loved our men's event on Thursday night, because they all had name tags on. People thought I knew everybody. It's just because I can read. I'm terrible with names. Terrible with names. So I'll put reminders on my phone to go off every Sunday of people. So I know it's hectic, but who knows? Who knows? In fact, and I've mentioned this to our volunteer teams a few times, and Luke, you can come on up so that everyone knows we are nearing the end. The man that actually pushed for us to start this church was an American missionary who was serving as a lecturer at a Bible college in the Killarney area. Wonderful man. There are a handful of you that have been around since the beginning, so you'll remember Bill Hennessy. And their whole family, I think they had a family of 4 kids. They moved to Cape Town from Nigeria. Before that, I think, was where they were stationed. But they were from America originally. And so they were stationed, they were living in Milnerton Ridge. And they were attending our church in Tableview at the time for roughly 6 months. And he said that he was so, and just to be clear, this isn't a reflection on that church. I'm saying this is a reflection on church, on people, on us. At that stage, I think for about 6 months, no one had put any effort into greeting or introducing themselves or anything else. And he says that he made a decision that day. If nobody tries to connect with us today, this is after 6 months, we're done. We're going to find another church. Anyway, on that particular day, and again, a few of you would know Warren Hield Sr., Warren and Evelyn Hield. Warren went up to them, introduced himself, invited them for lunch, had them over for lunch that day. Became a wonderful part of our church, joined our leadership team, and it was in one of our elders meetings where he said to us, hey guys, I don't know if you realize this, but you can, at this stage, you can grow up, you can live your entire life in Milnerton Ridge. He was just thinking of that particular area and never know that, what it is to even have a church or have the option of going to church. And so he kind of got us thinking about the idea of planting at that stage just a campus here, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, long story short, we have right now, today, we'll have in the region of 650, 700 people that'll come through these 2 services between kids and everybody else. Because Warren Hield introduced himself to Dr. Bill Hennessy. And so I've often said to our guys, I get it. Like, we have social anxieties and we don't want to make a fool of ourselves. But I remind them that courage is when the fear of not acting is greater than the fear of acting. So where the fear of actually not trying to connect with someone, not being willing to introduce yourself, not being willing to try something, realizing that the potential consequences of that is far greater than the fear of what could happen if I just try. Worst case scenario, you embarrass yourself. Worst case scenario, you stutter like Tuddy and you're like, blah, 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 blah. I'm joking. Tuddy and I, we're BFFs. Actually, truth be told, I'm speaking for myself. I'm speaking from personal experience. I had to, there was nothing about my personality that wanted to meet new people. I hated it. Naturally, I'm far more on the introverted side of the spectrum than the extroverted side of things. I prefer familiar relationships to unfamiliar. I've had to train a muscle, and I thank God that I have, because I'd far rather take the risk of embarrassing myself than someone coming in and leaving, walking in and walking out, being like kind of thinking that they've come to church for months and never having a single person try and introduce themselves and greet them. So that's all I'm inviting you to do. Take your first step. Just take your first step. And for many of us, that's finding some common ground. I was mentioning to the guys on Thursday, we had a great night, by the way, on Thursday night with our first men's night of the year. You're welcome. That there are currently in the region of 8 billion, 200 and I forget, 40 or 204 million people in the world. Let's just say 8.2 billion, okay? There you go. I checked this morning, it's gone up a little bit since then. Just so you know, it's constantly going up. And that's a number that we can't get our heads around, and it's quite mind-blowing. Like, that number has doubled since when I was born in 1976. Like, it's scary to think. The year before that, 1975, it was 3.9 billion people. Like, it's weird. It's weird to think how the world population just continues to grow, in the sense of we can't fully get our heads around it yet. To us, that's a number. To God, every number has a name. Every name has a story, and every story matters to God. And I believe that it's God's will that your name is known, that your story is discovered, and that you know that you matter to God because you actually matter to somebody else. Just take your first step. And then your next. And let's do what we can to actually grow closer and closer towards the vision that God has for being the community of Jesus, which will provide life and love for those around us. Let's pray.